Welcome again, Pastor James here. We're jumping into week 3 of our Connection Group series called Active Church is Worldly. We really wanted to have conversations around these topics and really just open the floor to unpack this idea of what it means to be worldly as followers of Jesus and as a church. Right now, you're going to hear from a good friend of mine, Pastor Josh, is one of our worship leaders at Active Church, and he's going to talk about repentance, Legos, and believe it or not, some more sibling rivalry. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
So I really like watching kids get into temper tantrums. You guys seen those? I think they're pretty funny. Let me tell you a quick story about when my brother got one. So we were at home, and his name's Moses. He's really good at like playing with Legos and putting them together. I'm kind of the type of person who like would take the Legos out of the bag and then just dump it, and then it was done, right? It was like just rearrange it, like there, it's finished. But my brother was more like the type of person who could actually visualize something and then make it happen. So he would like get the Legos and then he'd build like the Titanic. He built the scene of like Rose and Jack. Right? Make different. Anyways, point is he's really good at it, and me not so much. Maybe I was a little jealous, maybe just like a little bit. And so one time I remember he walked out of the room. He had built like the Titanic boat, and I was like walking next to it, and then my leg kind of like swung out, and so I hit it, and it fell over, and it like broke, and so then he hears it, and he comes in the room, and then and he's crying, and then I said this thing that it's like a phrase in Spanish. It says "lo hice sin querer queriendo," which loosely translates to "I accidentally did it on purpose." And so then he kind of went into like temper tantrum mode. And so then that kind of threw me into that space, and he called me a Lego kicker. And just for whatever reason, like when you're in temper tantrum mode, anything that's said to you can be extremely offensive, right? Like you can be complimenting somebody in that moment, and it'll still like make you really angry. So he called me a Lego kicker, and then I was angry, and then for whatever reason, just like the emotions got to me, and like my parents walk in, and it turns into this whole scene, and then out of it, I'm crying, and I'm like, I'm not worthy to be your brother. I don't know why I said that, but I did, right? So that's my story on that. Anyway, so I want to now transition into speaking about repentance, and here's how this connects. So I think often when we think about the conversation of repentance and about forgiveness, it's often in context of different circumstances like this, where we've made a mistake or where we've done something wrong, and we're trying to figure out how to correct it. In this story of me knocking over my brother's Legos, it's one of those moments where I've done something that I know is wrong. I know it's wrong. Like I know that I've made a mistake. I'm the wrong one in the situation. Often, I think the behavior of us as human beings is we will repeat these things. Like we'll do something wrong, and then we'll keep doing it. And what I realized is the story that I've talked to you about was the first time that I knocked over my brother's Legos, but I did that a couple more times after that, and I didn't feel as bad. A couple of times into it, maybe the 10th or 11th time, it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of fun to be reckless. Yeah, I'm a Lego kicker. I've kind of like I took on the identity of being that. And I think often we do that with ourselves and with different just circumstances that we go through. Like we will take on the identity of being a Lego kicker, right? That was me. So one of the things that I find funny about repentance, or how we do repentance, is that sometimes we'll ask for forgiveness by just explaining the situation. So it might look something like I'm having a conversation with my brother, and I'm kind of like, I saw the Legos that you were working on, and I walked in the room, and I kicked the Legos, and then you started crying. Hug? like all we've done is explained what was happening, but we've not actually, forgiveness wasn't asked for, repentance wasn't actually processed. All we've done is explained the situation. And I think often the friction in our relationships and a lot of the tension that we have with people comes from us thinking that we've asked for forgiveness or thinking that we've actually done the steps of repentance. And really all we've done is just kind of explained why we kicked the Legos, right? So I've been doing some thinking about repentance, did some reading online, and I think here's 3 things that kind of help us understand the process of repentance. So number 1 is reflection. I think repentance, it causes us to take a moment to reflect and to think, like, why did I do that, right? Why did I say this to this person? Why did I say it that way? Why did I address it in that moment? Why am I the type of person that causes more tension? Why did I escalate the situation? Right? So in a moment of repentance, you're actually taking a moment to reflect and to think on, why did I do this? Why did I react this way? Or why am I treating people in this way? I think the second phase of repentance is regret. Often as we reflect on these things, we'll get this type of feeling or sense of guilt of like, man, why did I do that? Or you'll start feeling kind of sorry that you've put somebody in that situation. Right? Like, I'm sorry that I've said that to you. I'm sorry that I've made you feel that way. I'm sorry that I've kind of caused this whole thing to happen in this way. And I think for many of us, we'll often stop there. We've reflected on what we've done bad, and we'll even feel remorse or regret or that tension or that feeling of like, I made a mistake. Sorry about kicking the Legos, and never move into the third step, which is committing to change, right? A conviction of like, I've got to do this differently, and maybe even verbalizing it, right? Saying like, I thought about this, I'm sorry, and I'm never going to do that again, right? I'm never going to say that again. It's a commitment and a conviction on changing who you are, right? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to speak to you in that way. I'm not going to say this anymore. And I think that begins to complete the picture of repentance. And if we, I think, operated under this like view of repentance, or if we practice repentance kind of in this way more, I think some of our relationships would get better. This is for them. This is what we're talking about this week. And I think when we look at John 3:16, and do a quick recap of it, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. I think this thing on repentance is interesting to me because often when we're asking for forgiveness, this is about describing who we are as a person. Joe addressed this a little bit last week, saying often the decisions that we make, they do not describe or prescribe who we are, right? Like the mistakes that we've made, I am not that mistake. And I think forgiveness and repentance is kind of taking that next step into understanding and to claiming that you are not that person, right? You are not your sin, you're not your mistakes, you are not your wrongs, but you're taking a step forward into becoming something different and choosing to become something different. So what Jesus is describing in John 3:16 as he's speaking to Nicodemus is this, like, you always have the opportunity to become something different. That opportunity is always there. This act of believing, this process of believing in who Jesus is your opportunity to constantly become something else and to not be limited to mistakes that you've made or the tension that you face in your own life, all the different things that we deal with. That opportunity of believing in Jesus takes you out of that and says, you're free from being that. Often we're asking God for repentance on different things that we've done, but it's not very often that we're talking to God about acknowledging and accepting who we are. Yeah, like we'll ask for repentance on the things that we've done wrong, but not necessarily on acknowledging who God says that we are. Yeah, and I think repentance, this other side of it, is us acknowledging that God sees us as his child, that God sees us as love, that God sees us as somebody who has extreme value. And often we're caught up in asking for repentance or asking for forgiveness in all these different areas of our lives. And never do we stop and pause and think about what is it that God is actually saying about who I am? So a couple of months ago, I was at Target. And this is when Star Wars had just come out. And I'm walking through the toy aisle, and I just so happened to go into the Lego section, and they've got Millennium Falcon Legos. And long story short, I bought it and I gave it to my bro. And so fast forward, he's building the Legos, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking I am not a Lego kicker. I did not kick those Legos. And I think often for us, like, even though that's maybe a small glimpse of different situations that we go through, I think the work of God in our lives is to help us see repentance as something that makes us into better people, something that helps us see more value in the people around us and even more value in ourselves. I think the beauty of repentance is that I can come to see myself as a child of God. I can come to see myself as loved by God. And I think when we get there, when we start practicing repentance in this way, it's truly that we'll see ourselves as children of God.